thank you so much, and thank you for my panelists. I have the pleasure of have Mr. Devesh Chaturvedi, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare from the Government of India. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. Alka Nangya Arora, Financial Advisor of the Indian Air Force. Thank you very much to be with us. And Sharon Burke, Chief Engagement Officer of CIMIT. Thank you very much for being with us today. So the topic of this panel is essentially how we can work on peace through agriculture and how we can assure that we can cope with the risks and uncertainties that we will be facing in the world. As I mentioned before, we are going to expect significant uncertainties only on climate, also on trade issues, on the scarcity of natural resources, especially of water. So how we can cope with that? So let me start first with the first question to Mr. Devesh Chaturvedi. The question is, what policy measures or collaborative frameworks do you see as most effective in ensuring that agricultural development also reinforces an stability in rural areas?
Consider India's perspective. We have more than 140 crore people to feed. And we have taken a long journey from the 60s and 70s where we were dependent on imports for our basic needs of food grains. And now we are becoming food surplus in many of those. So food security and nutritional security is one of the mainstays of India's policy. And it's not just a question of food security and nutritional security, because that can happen even through imports if you have a tide of imports. But it's also a question of livelihood for our country. We have more than 46% of our workforce engaged in agriculture overall, and about 59% in rural areas is engaged in agriculture and allied activities. So for them, the question is of ensuring that their livelihoods continue through agriculture and also ensuring that we are able to feed. So that's why we have very important 2-3 policies which I would like to highlight. One, of course, is to ensure that the productivity increases to a levels where we are able to feed people at whatever area which we have, because area cannot expand and there is urbanization and there is also industrialization going on. So climate resilient seeds, climate resilient technologies are one of the important cornerstones of our policies, where collaboration is happening across ICAR institutions and even at global level. And then we have the issue of biofortified varieties, having better varieties to have a more balanced diet for our people. The diversification from food grains to fruit, vegetables, milk, meat, and all those things, these are also one of the policy imperatives for us. And second major issue is to ensure that farmers get remunerative prices. So whether it is better technology-based marketing opportunities for the farmers, or also the minimum support price, which we have as a flagship program, to ensure that farmers do not have to resort to distressed sales at the time of harvesting, because we all know that agriculture is the only such, you can say, the sector where the demand is for the whole year, but production is only for a month. That is during the harvesting season. And therefore, if we leave the farmers to the market forces, it will not be possible for them to get remunerative prices, and there will be a distressed sale. To ensure that, and because we have small and marginal farmers, it's very difficult for them to hold for a longer time as compared to large farms of other countries. So therefore, we have to have that minimum support price regime, which ensures that the prices, if falls below MSP, then government is ready to help them. So these are the policy imperatives which are absolutely necessary to ensure food security and that the distress in farm sector does not happen in any situation. And last point would be the crop insurance, which is something which is sort of security to the farmers, that in case of any vagaries of weather, which is happening more often now, we are able to provide them relief through compensation of the crop losses. So these are the broad policy imperatives.
Let me follow on one question. When you go to sleep, which are the risks that you are really concerned for the next morning? No, when you go to sleep at night,
yes,
which are the risks in the agricultural sector that you are really concerned? because you were talking about availability, supplies, stabilization of prices. But there could be a significant drought. There could be something, what we are observing today with uncertainty on trade. So which are the risks that you're really concerned?
So the risks, primary risks which we are always concerned and we are always on toes in the ministry is some sort of outbreak of any pests or diseases which we have to take control immediately. Of course, the weather itself is very important. We had a good news of a good monsoon, but that monsoon itself has a lot of spatial distribution. So we still have some areas which are under flood. So we have to give relief to them and ensure that whatever the crop losses have happened, the farmers do get compensation and they are fully prepared for the next season so that there is no loss in the subsequent season. So these are the two main issues which are always in our mind. And third, of course, is that we don't have at any point of time at any place a distress sale of, especially of the perishables. That is something the fruits and vegetables sector is prone to distress sale if the crop is very high and the marketing system is not efficient. So these are the three broad risks which we always keep in mind and we design our policies to ensure that these risks are mitigated.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me pass now to Alka Aurora Nangia. So we keep talking about agri-food systems and the relationship of the different sectors that interrelate in the agricultural sector. So how can interministerial collaboration, particularly between defense, agriculture and rural development, be strengthened to address the nexus of food security and national stability?
This is a very interesting topic because for the past few days I have been myself doing a lot of research that how do you connect defense and agriculture and rural development to each other. So when I've been talking to many senior officers in the defense sector, there has been a unanimous discussion, say on this that yes, this is an area where with the changing geopolitical conditions across the globe, we need to have more collaboration and more discussion on these topics. If we were to look at any papers published on this area, I would say at least with all my research, I could not find one. But having worked across a few sectors, like I worked for 5 years in the micro, small, medium enterprises, and for the past 3 years I was working in the agriculture sector with very close, with ICR as the financial advisor, and now I'm in the defense sector. One can say that both are the soldier as well as the farmer. They are both on the ground and both are working that, if simply we put it, that if we have food on the table, we have a farmer to thank for. And as you said, if we can sleep in the night, then we have the soldier to thank for. So when we start looking at what we can do, and since Secretary Agriculture is here, and looking at the different areas, every year many of the soldiers and the officers get their retirement, or after 20 years in service in the Indian Army, Navy, Air Force, they retire. So a lot of these skill development courses are being done across the forces, and the officers are going for management courses, whereas the men are going for various farming courses or management courses, as well as there are organizations like NISBIRD from the micro, small, medium enterprises, which are also doing these short-term courses for the soldiers. Now when they go back to the rural sector or the villages where they are coming from, and as it was mentioned that the farm size here is decreasing or has become smaller, the productivity can be increased up to a particular level. So what is important is that I always feel where agriculture finishes, there the micro and the small and the medium enterprises start. So the initiatives which all of us have to take is to bring the manufacturing or the production or the food processing at the farm level. Now as Sir had mentioned that there is the fresh fruits and the vegetables, they bring you a particular price. Even when we are trying to create cooperatives, self-help groups, they are taking it to up to a particular level. Now what we need to is also find a marketplace, and in the new world, we need to get into online platforms, we need to build up brands, and that is where we need to look into the knowledge which many of the people who have been working in the armed forces, like there are a lot of officers and men who are trained in the technical areas, like drones which we are using in agriculture. Now drones are being used in the new warfare also. We have seen the entire Op Sindoor which was fought on a usage of lot of drones. So the people who are there, they are technically qualified, and when they come back to the normal society, they need to find a place, and their skills and education can be very well used here. Similarly, the soil we all know is a very, very important area where a lot of work has been done, and in our country, I was also part of one of the Jal Shakti Abhiyans, which was initiated by our Honorable Prime Minister in the year 2018. That is the time the country started getting into the water conservation, the soil card became a very important part of it. Now here again, the technical skills of these men can be again used, and they can, maybe we can also start some programs like agri entrepreneurship, and they can do a partnership kind of the agriculture sector. ICR is working with nearly 70 plus agriculture universities, and they all have incubators where a lot of incubation is being done. At the ground level, today I was talking to one of the men whom we have in the Air Force, and he was telling me in Rajasthan, the area where he comes from, earlier they used to grow cumin seeds. Now with some kind of research, they have realized that if they grow pomegranate, it is better there. So these new researches, if we try to take them to the ground level. Similarly, the Krishi Vigyan Kendras which the ICR is holding, there are 730 of them across the country. They can become the centers of education, learning. They are already doing a lot of courses. But sometimes what happens is that all these courses for the armed forces across the 3 services are done by the resettlement board. Now we need to make a bridge and a collaboration between the agriculture ministry, the rural development ministry, and the armed forces, so that people are aware, and then they choose the best course, and maybe we follow them for a year or so, that what exactly, when they did the course and they've gone back to the ground level, what exactly have they learned, and how are they using it for their benefit and also for the benefit of the place where they are working. Similarly, all the 3 services, at least in our country, they are also running their welfare programs for the women, and we all know that women are sometimes the silent partners in the agriculture sector. So to bring them also into the main fold, together with the various schemes which the Government of India is running in the agriculture sector as well as in the rural development sector, I personally feel that we need to collaborate at such events, and maybe next time have a little representation also from the armed forces, so that they also know what is happening in the larger global picture. Thank you.
Let me follow up very briefly. So do you observe that the defense sector, in the case of India, is taking into account the potential risks that could happen because of water access, because of trade issues, or because of other mechanisms that could accelerate conflict? Is they are taking into account in their own decisions and strategy, sharing this information with the Agricultural Ministry or the Ministry of Planning, so that they are better prepared for this?
I think what we need to is open dialogues, because there are times that, you know, every sector is concentrating on a particular, and see, the armed forces are spread across the country. So at the field level, certain decisions can be taken which have nothing to do with the procurement or the larger decisions at large, because ultimately every person is trying to lead a normal life, and once you retire from the services, you want to be a part of the civil society.
Thank you so much. Let me now move to Sharon. So Sharon, in many conflict contexts, and conflict is one of the major drivers of food insecurity, especially in Africa, agriculture is a major source of employment. So how can we ensure that needed innovations and support are reaching farmers in this challenging context and supporting them to feed their communities and rebuild?
Thank you so much, Maximo, for the question, and it's great to be on a panel, especially with this question of how food security is created at a local level. That's what I believe we've been hearing about. And I want to go to a higher level, in deference to my Air Force colleague, go up to a higher altitude and talk about that relationship between food and insecurity generally. So this is nothing new in human history. There's always been a relationship between hunger and war. It goes back, I was looking for some examples and came to Thucydides, who wrote more than 2,000 years ago about the way that Athens fell because their people were starving and it led to disease. They couldn't get to their fields, and at times the Spartans deliberately withheld food and blocked them from producing food and getting to their fields. So this has been a fact of life for human societies as long as we've had societies. Hunger is a reality of war, both as a driver of unrest and a consequence of conflict. But to your question, agriculture can also be a powerful asset for peace building, and I think we have to focus on how much more important that's becoming. So going back to the relationship between hunger and war, it is definitely a vicious cycle where food insecurity can drive conflict, and then conflict can drive food insecurity, and it's very hard to break out of that. So first, the way that conflict drives food insecurity, it's a driver of conflict can actually undermine food systems. That's the destruction of farms and infrastructure, the displacement of farmers, disrupted supply chains, and higher prices. As your presentation made a very good case for, that's a hugely destabilizing problem worldwide now. And while I'm here today as a citizen of CIMMYT, my original nationality is the United States, and after the last election, there were polls that showed that people who voted for the current president cited high food prices as one of the reasons that they chose him. So there is a variety of ways that those high prices can create instability. And of course now all of this is exacerbated by climate change, biodiversity loss, and other environmental degradation. Now, at the same time that all of that drives food insecurity feeds conflict in a variety of ways. Competition over resources, economic instability and grievances, increased migration and displacement. And there's no question that food plays a part in social unrest and instability and even war. But of course, the causes of war are also multivariate. There's usually sometimes a single catalyst to a conflict, but rarely a single cause. It's usually many different root causes. What's interesting is on the other side of this, there's a much more clearly causal relationship between food and peace, and agriculture and security. And that's where I think we really need to focus more effort. First, in fragile and conflict-affected areas, it's very important that agriculture is part of restoring livelihoods and access to food. Both of those things, you can't have peace for a local population without them. And it creates a basis for social cohesion and for trust. But in the larger sense, agriculture and food, and particularly adapted agriculture for changing conditions, builds bridges across divides. And that's at a community level, but that can also be at a geopolitical level. This is a place where nations can agree and must agree. Food diplomacy can be a tool of de-escalation at all levels of warfare. CIMMYT has certainly seen this directly in our work. We had a project called Sustainable Agri-Food Systems Approach for Sudan. We worked with 13 partners. This was a large project, $60 million project, that went over the course of 18 months. And this was rebuilding agricultural capacity at a community level in areas that were not in active conflict, but were just post-conflict. And it was amazingly successful. It was comprehensive, from seed systems all the way to market development. And we touched about 1 million people's lives. We saw an increase in yields for maize, and increase in livelihoods to market, particularly for women who were a big part of this process. And then also, this was a way to bring internally displaced people, which is a significant problem in Sudan, into the local economy and also into the food system. So we were able to see really good returns here, and we're already looking at other places where we can bring this approach as a stabilizing factor. So we think it's a very helpful and hopeful area of our work where we can help stabilize, use agriculture as a tool of stability. You know, when I was looking through ancient history and ancient philosophy, I thought also, out of respect for the audience, that I should also look at what in the ancient Sanskrit and ancient Indian thought would be in this space. And what's interesting is it's a little harder to find a lot of discussion about the relationship between food and conflict, but a lot more in the Vedas about the relationship between the earth and plants and peace. So I feel like this is a conversation that we can all have together, our organizations, as we look for a way forward.
No, thank you so much. And let me do a very brief follow-up question. So one of the major issues that we expect to happen with climate and extreme weather events is migration. Not only migration of human beings, but also migration of pests and diseases, because they will evolve. And one of the things that we're observing lately is that the investment on transboundary diseases has been declining. Now, do you think this also opens the window for more conflict and more issues across borders, which could be linked to trade barriers, which could be linked to blockages of food moving across borders?
I do. I think it's a major concern. Again, higher food prices, poor access to food, people when they're hungry or when they're worried about being hungry or when they can't afford food, they go out. And so that's the roots of social unrest, that's the roots of violence, of civil violence, and that is the roots of conflict. And so what causes that? Well, as these pests and diseases migrate and the crop systems where they're going are not ready for it, we are going to see problems, and you are going to see that link back to social unrest. Again, remember, high bread prices will get people in the street faster than anything else. And one of the things that's happening with the current shift in global aid patterns is that things like the global pest and disease surveillance system that CIMMYT is part of is no longer getting funded. So that means, I think that our Director General spoke this morning about UG99 and the fact that it was caught early in Uganda and as a result was able to be stopped, and it didn't didn't have widespread effect. This surveillance system, if it goes down, we can't count on that anymore. And I do think that you will see one consequence being a rise in social unrest and potentially more than that.
And one of the greatest values of the gene banks is the biodiversity, and which allow us to cope with these options. And that's where we cannot let it go, because it's our major resilience tool in terms of coping with this evolution of pests and diseases. So colleagues, now we move to what are the next steps and actions that we need to follow. So in the following minutes, I will give you 2 minutes to each to tell me what you think within this logic of the risk and uncertainties that we're going to feel in this sector, with the logic that there are potential stresses in terms of access to water. We see it here in India in certain states, but also with the stresses of migration and mobility, and also with potential problems on the bigger suppliers of food to the world and the bigger suppliers of inputs. Because in the world, there are very few key exporters of cereals, there are very few key exporters of inputs, fertilizers and seeds, certified seeds. So what will be the next steps? What you will be thinking that we need to implement to be able to minimize those risks and to increase our resilience? So let me go first to you.
So
lies is in our own Indian philosophy of life. And we all know that the Indians sitting here, that we believe in Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which is a Sanskrit word, which means कि हिंदी में कहते हैं पूरा विश्व एक परिवार है, the whole world is a family. So our Indian engagement with the world is that the world is a family, and wherever there is stress, it's like a stress to a family, a member, and we should always strive across whatever our thinking is, whatever our, whether it's a unipolar or bipolar or tripolar world, that we should go and ensure that that stress is removed. And so that's how we are engaging with UN World Food Program also. We are always ready to provide all sorts of assistance into whatever surplus food grains we have. We are quite liberal in providing them, and in other ways also, in providing technologies also. And the second very important philosophy of our governance is Antyodaya, which means that we should reach to the bottommost person in the pyramid, which means that whoever is the person who is the most, you can say, inaccessible, or who is the one who is the most deprived person, maybe in terms of hunger or maybe in terms of malnutrition, we have to reach that person and ensure that our schemes and policies are able to help them in upgrading their in life. So our call of action would be that we should follow these two philosophies in terms of collaboration, that the world is the one family as far as food and nutrition is concerned and hunger is concerned. We have to eradicate it wherever it is there. And second is that we have to reach the last person in the pyramid so that we can upgrade his or her lifestyle and bring cheers to them. That is the whole message which our philosophy says, and that's how we are working. So you talked about migration. So in fact, one of the very successful ventures in India is that we have this one nation, one ration card system, where if a person migrates from, say, a state of Uttar Pradesh to, say, Mumbai, and with a ration card, and the technology has ensured that the person can take the food grains in Mumbai, even if the person is registered in the village in Uttar Pradesh. So that compatibility across the country has ensured that the migrant laborer in India can also get the same food grains that is. And even if part of the family is living in the village and part of the family is living across some industrial town, they can have their share differently also. So that's the sort of interoperability of public distribution system that we have ensured to reach to those levels of principles which we want to follow. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think human beings tend to forget, but during COVID-19, we really struggled and we really understood what you are saying. The world is a family, and we are completely interlinked, and what happens in one place will affect others. So that's super important to have that principle. And of course, the last one that you mentioned, the second one, we need to touch the more vulnerable people and we need to support them the most far away. And that's central, and that's part also of this global alliance against hunger and poverty that is being pushed through the G20 of Brazil. Thank you very much. Ms. Alca ahora.
What Sir just said, that knowledge sharing and taking whatever, sometimes we take it for granted, like all of us who are in this room here, and we as speakers, and when we talk about the policies and what the governments in different countries are working on, we take it for granted that the person at the last level or the last mile connectivity, everybody knows everything what's happening. But when you step out in the field, hunger is a universal issue, and the food scarcity, and with the changing scenario of floods and rains and earthquakes and whatever keeps coming at different times, it's all unpredictable. So the food security and the discussions which happen at the UN level or at various world platforms, but sometimes at the ground level people don't really know what's happening. So we all together, we should have some educational programs, and in today's time I feel secondary agriculture or tertiary level agriculture, that yes, food is also there, but to supplement the agriculture growth with the secondary agriculture, and the government in India, at least what I know of, has been working on various schemes where we are encouraging especially the women to have work in sectors like the piggery, the rearing of the goats, and also setting up very small enterprises where the collection of the milk can be done in that small area, or if you are growing some flowers, you extract some oil. So certain smaller things which will help them across the globe, and so they can increase their income and work for the betterment of the food and the supply chains also in the food storage as well as the food processing, because on the high altitude the kind of food which is required. So these things, when there is excess production, if we can get into that there's no wonder pill which is still being made that all of us can pop and be fine, but which can take away the hunger. But yes, we can think of certain things which in the future, when there is excess productivity or excess fruit is there, we get into some things which will help all of us in the future.
Thank you very much, and that's related to increasing the tools that people have for increasing their resilience. And this could go from the most vulnerable to the less vulnerable, but we need to work intensively in increasing those tools. Sharon.
Well, I think first we have to be willing to tackle the hard problems of food security today. And that's not just because all Sudanese deserve to live in dignity, but also because we need Ukraine to ship its wheat to global markets. So we can't be afraid to tackle the hard problems. But the motto for CIMMYT, our vision statement, is that we solve tomorrow's problems today. So we also need to make the investment in innovation, in young people, in all of the means that we are going to need to be able to have security, to have peace in the future. And that includes anticipatory tools that help us understand better where to put our efforts. So I think we have to be willing to invest in what we need in order to have a better tomorrow. And that's very difficult when everything in the foreground is so challenging, but we have to make room for that too.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And please join me in thanking all the panelists with a big applause. So, colleagues, let me try to summarize very briefly in the last 2 minutes. So I think what we have seen is that we know for sure that there will be an increase in frequency and intensity of climate events. There is no question about that. That will happen in the next 10 years, no matter what we do. So we need to be prepared to that. You are seeing significant flooding here. You are seeing droughts in other parts of the world. And there are no boundaries. It doesn't matter the level of income. But what the level of income matters is on how fast I can respond to this problem and how resilient I am to that problem. So resilience, I think, is a crucial word in this environment. We need to develop tools to be more resilient. We need to have capacity to provide. But we cannot assume that we will always be able to provide everything we need, because that won't be the case. If a country that is self-sufficient gets a significant drought or a significant flood, what they will do? They need food from other places. And we have seen that on what happened with the Ukraine war, with Northern Africa, what happened in many dramatic situations of flooding in different countries. So we need to find ways to increase our resilience. And resilience is a relationship between what we produce and also how much we can trade and how many trade partners we have, so that we can easily move commodities from one location to the other in case of the need. But also what we produce is central in that sense. But also, as it has mentioned, there needs to be resilience tools for the vulnerable people. How we can help them to react to this situation. And here is also what Sharon was saying. We need to be preventive. Normally, we respond after the shock has happened. And that has a cost. In the contrary, if we anticipate the problem, the return is 1 to 7. $1 invested, 7 of return. If we respond quickly, it's 1 to 3. That's what the evidence tells us. So we need to have these plans ready and be able to have anticipation. And here the information will be central. The capacity of forecasting, the capacity of predicting events that will happen will need to be essential. And why this is so important? Because we know now, and we always have known, although not necessarily documented, is that food insecurity can be a source of conflict. We saw what happened in the 2007-2011 food crisis, and how, because of the lack of food, because of food insecurity of staple commodities, there was social unrest in many countries. We don't want that to happen again. We were able to cope with that during COVID-19, and we minimized those risks because we had more information. We also learned that logistic infrastructure is central. We are seeing that now. We are seeing that in the war in Ukraine. We saw it in COVID-19. So we need to be better prepared with that type of strategic information so that we can cope when those situations appear and have alternative ways to do. And also we know that conflict and wars are starting to use food. And that's what we need to try to avoid. Because food is essential for human beings. And shouldn't be a tool, neither of speculation, financial speculation, and shouldn't be a tool of war, as a war instrument. So we need to fight hard to avoid that to happen, because that's something that we don't have the right to do. That's why we have the right to food. So thank you so much for the panel today, and it was a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.